All right, let's talk about rent versus buy. And a lot of times you hear in the media that they say it's cheaper to rent, but is it really cheaper to rent versus buy? Let's talk about that and let's look at the numbers. So in this scenario, we're going to use just a regular or just regular, we're just grabbing 2,500 bucks in rent. And then we're going to model it out with a $600,000 purchase. And in this case, we're going to show 20% down and a 6.5% rate. Now, this is just for illustration purposes. It's not a commitment to land. It's not a quote in any way. It's just for illustrations. So at that point, what most people do is they compare what's my rent at 2,500 bucks and what's it going to cost me on my monthly payment on a mortgage. In this case, it's 35.98, which is taxes, principal, interest, and insurance. So you're thinking, okay, 1,100 bucks, it's way more expensive for me to buy. But that's where people make the mistake because out of that 35.98, you've got $433 that's going towards your principal. It's amortization. Every time you make a payment, it's forced savings. Some of that payment goes back into your pocket essentially through principal reduction. And people don't look at it that way. They just look at what's my payment. And when you take this into account, your net effective mortgage payment is $3,165 because you're paying yourself back $433 on the very first payment. So then you should be really comparing the 3165 to the 2500 bucks, and that's a difference of 665 per month. Now, let's be clear. You still have to pay the 35.98, but net effective, you're really paying 3165 when you take into account that you're paying yourself 433 per month on the very first month. You're not paying yourself jack when you're renting. You're throwing it all away. That's what people don't take into consideration. So now what we hear people say is, well, I'll just wait till rates drop. When rates drop, I'll get into the market and I'll buy then. It'll make more sense for me. But are you really winning? Are you really understanding how the numbers are going to work? Because a lot of people are shocked to hear that the same $600,000 house in 2 years is probably going to be 674. And we base that off the fact that homes have appreciated by 6% over the last 2 years. So simple math, you got a $100,000 house, 1 year, it's 106. In 2 years, it's 112. So you may win the battle by waiting and getting a lower rate, but you've cost yourself in this scenario $74,000 more because homes have continued to appreciate. And homes will continue to appreciate because there's a housing shortage. Separate video on that. We won't get into weeds there, but it will continue to increase. So at that point, now your cost of acquisition just went up. Your percentage of down payment just went up from 120 to 134. The amount you're financing just went up from 480 to 539. You won the little battle on the rate. You went from 6.5 to 4.5, and now you've got a lower payment of 32.97 versus 35.98. But what did you really win? Let's go through the same comparison. Out of this 35.97, 710 is going towards principal. All right, so it's money being paid back to you. So your net effective payment's 25.87. In comparison to if you bought today, then that would be a payment of 31.65, which is a difference of 5.77. So you're like, okay, Mike, I'm winning, but are you really? So now let's get into what a lot of people talk about: date the rate, marry the house. And a lot of people can't effectively explain this, but this is how this is explained, and you can see why. So if you buy the house at today's lower price before the 6% appreciation, it continues to go up, and it's going to continue to go up. You buy it here in column 3, you lock in an acquisition cost of 6%. Then when rates drop, you then get that lower rate of 4.5, and then you have the lower monthly payment of $29.97 fully escrowed payment. Same math, $632 of that is going towards your principal, which is amortization. So your net effective payment is $2,365. That's cheaper than your rent of $2,500. And if you go back and compare it to if you bought today with the higher rates, now you're talking about a savings of $800. $800. Now let's drive this point a little bit further. You've got rent of 2,500 bucks. In just 24 months, you've thrown away $60,000. So you've got a burn rate of $30,000 per month, per year rather. I'm sorry. During each of those 3 scenarios I showed you, in the first one, if you didn't refinance out of the higher rate, you would still accumulate $11,089 in amortization. If you would have paid the higher mortgage and got the lower rate, you would have had $17,800 in amortization. And then if you buy now, refinance later, you would have had $15,542. Now here's where it really comes all together. In 5 years, you would have had zero to show for your rent. And we've already established you've got a burn rate of $30,000 a year. So you would have thrown $150,000 away in rent and have zero to show for it. Whereas with buying now and refinancing the rate later, you locked in that lower acquisition cost, and now you've got $328,210 in net equity. Now, the reason why the center column's higher, you got a higher amount, you got a lower rate, you're putting more towards principal. So it's going to work that way, but you're paying for it. You've also put more money into the house because this looks higher, and it is higher, but you also had a higher down payment to get you started. So this is already, that center column's already going to start off on the higher side versus here. So you have less money in and you're paying less money per month. You tolerated the higher rates for the short term. You locked in that lower acquisition cost, and now you've got $328,000 to show for it. This is why buying versus renting is hands down not even a comparison. Not even a comparison. And why you should buy now versus later. Waiting to buy is going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars. In this scenario, in just 2 years, it costs you 60 grand. In 5 years, it costs you $150,000. If you got questions, let us know. Have a great one.